The Hawkeye offense has a chance to explode. Kirk Ferentz makes a terrific hire. Warren Ruggiero coming in to help out the offense and bring the slow mesh to Iowa City.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts. You can also watch us on YouTube. While you're there, hit that subscribe button. Just takes a moment and helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. Some big news coming out of Iowa City. And no, it's the winter sports season, yes, but it is not about the basketball teams. No, this is about the football team and what I believe is a stroke of genius. Iowa going out and working to continue to improve their offensive staff with the hiring of former Broyles Award finalist and ACC offensive coordinator Warren Ruggiero comes in to help out with the offensive staff. Now, we saw a year ago the improvement offensively out of Iowa after the 2 years previous, the disaster that was the previous regime. At least a year ago, we saw that run game completely fixed, completely revamped, a run game and an RPO system that made a whole lot of sense with Caleb Johnson going off and having an absolutely incredible season. Tim Lester, it was a hire that was widely panned when it happened, myself included. There were other names I thought that made more sense. However, Tim Lester in year number one proved at minimum is a guy that's going to get it and is now improving. He has completely revamped the quarterback room. We see the quarterbacks that he inherited, they're all out the door. He has brought his own guys in. We saw the run game improvements. And now the final step to this equation is fixing a passing game that has been nothing short of dreadful for the last half decade. You bring in now a guy in Warren Ruggiero that has an opportunity to do just that. Couple of reasons that I absolutely love this hire from the Iowa football perspective. Number one, he's coming from Wake Forest. Wake Forest is a program that is not built like most of the ACC teams that they go up against. It is a very small private school. You look at the kind of guys that they recruit, it's a different level. They're not recruiting against Clemson and Florida State and Miami. They're taking a different kind of guy. What does that sound like? Certainly Iowa football and the way that they recruit. They are behind the eight ball in many different ways. Wake Forest, same thing with Iowa, certainly on the offensive side of things. So you bring in now a guy in Ruggiero who has proven to be able to put together an offense in a place that is not known for being offensive-minded. Tim Lester, bringing in that RPO system. We saw the merits last year. And now with his own quarterbacks, with the receiver group that comes back basically completely intact from a year ago at the wide receiver position. On top of it, you add Sam Phillips to the mix, a speedster out of Chattanooga. Now you're getting that speed dynamic into there. But one of the biggest reasons that I think people need to be excited about this hire is because Ruggiero is an innovator. This is a guy that thinks outside the box. And yes, he brings in an RPO system, and that is a part of it, and you get excited about that part. However, you dig a little bit deeper and you look at the mesh concept that he has employed. So Warren Ruggiero comes in, started with Dave Clawson at Bowling Green. They had a tremendous season there, then came with him, was there for the last decade at Wake Forest. And though the last 2 years did not go well, they went 4-8 both of those seasons, you still saw what they were able to do. A big reason for the step back, at least 2 years ago, was a loss of Sam Hartman. Another developmental program, a guy leaves before certainly they anticipated was going to be the case, and they struggled. You see Sam Hartman, who's now in the NFL. And what did he do in his 2 years in this offense? He was tremendous. 2021, when this mesh concept was implemented, he threw for 39 touchdowns, over 300 yards per game, 4,200 yards through the air in the 2021 season at Wake Forest. Then a year later, he comes back in 2 less games. There was for 3,700 yards, another 38 touchdowns against 12 interceptions, 77 yards, passing touchdowns, easy for me to say, 77 passing touchdowns for Sam Hartman in this offense. And then you also look back, there's been other quarterbacks that were really good under Ruggiero Before him, it was Jamie Newman. If you're a college fan, you remember his name. He was kind of the beginning of that build that happened in his final season. Jamie Newman at Wake Forest. This is a great hire. It really is. And not only that, this is an analyst. So there's one caveat we also have to put in there when we're talking about these analyst roles, because they come in varying degrees. Some guys come in more than anything, they're just looking for their next job. They're not going to put the work in, those kind of things. But when you're talking about Ruggiero, you could have given him perhaps the running back job. I think it also shows you, though, that he wants to be an offensive coordinator again, that he wants to get one more opportunity, and he believes it's going to happen here. With the guy that was as innovative as Warren Ruggiero, and for people that know him in the coaching lexicon and talking to people in the coaching world just today, that's one thing that they mentioned. They thought that this was a big coup by Iowa to getting him to come here, because he's going to get another job. He's going to have another opportunity. And because he is innovative, there's going to be other opportunities with him with that mesh concept. We'll get to what it exactly is here in a moment, because it's so fun to watch and so different than what you're used to watching in an RPO-based system. It says a lot. And it says a lot that he is willing to come here. There's over-unders now out there in terms of win total. Iowa, the over-under is 7.5. We've talked about how arduous the schedule is going to be for Iowa coming up this season. Much more difficult than this past year of what Iowa football is going to face. However, with this, knowing that you're not going to just be able to rely on the old defense like you did for years and years and years, you're going to have to score. I love it. There's more to be done. Running back job also going to be there, but Iowa for an analyst job. And you don't want to overstate what it is, but a guy that understands, a guy that gets it, I think this is incredibly intriguing. We got basketball to get into. We got more football to talk about. The NFL Draft Combine in the books. Some good, some bad, some indifferent. We're going to talk to Scott Dochterman a little bit about it. Get Doc's perspective. He was in Indianapolis for the NFL Draft Combine. We'll get his perspective. We'll talk about Jay Higgins. We'll take a look at Caleb Johnson. Did Caleb Johnson continue to be in that second round grade? What he did for himself. We'll talk about some other of the Iowa guys. Plus, we'll also get a look at Fran McCaffery, potentially his final game at Carver Hawkeye Arena coming up on Thursday. We'll talk about that all as we continue with Scott Dochterman from The Athletic. This is a Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades. Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400 more brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now, it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. That's the promo code, and use the promo code SH5. That'll get you 5% off your first order. Once again, SH5 for 5% off your first order. Only at supplyhouse.com.
Let's get to Scott Dochterman. How are you? Are you back in Iowa or still in Indy?
I got back late Saturday night. So, yeah, I was there from Monday through Saturday. And, I was pretty happy to be back.
I bet. That's a long week in Indianapolis. Doc, Does it get monotonous at all? I mean, does it go by? Does it fly by? Are you do you now know how to air quote do the combine in your perspective as a journalist out there more so than you did your first year you were there? How has it changed? Is it still, or is it kind of tedious toward the end?
Yeah, it gets tedious by the end of the week. I mean, there are different ways to do it. I mean, I was out there with our entire NFL crew. And then on the college's side, we had 2 editors, and me and Bruce Feldman. So we kind of do things differently. I handle a lot of the players in their podium interviews. I mean, Bruce knows a million people on the side. I talk to a few as well, just kind of out and about. And then there are other, sometimes it's late nights, and sometimes I'm too old to be out that late. I know better. So, but I always seem to mess it up at least once, and I did last week. So, but yeah, the combine is different now. It's, I don't know that there's as many people there this year as there have been in the past, but one of the things that really seems to stick out for me is there's a lot of team reporters, people who cover the teams, and they are way more homerish than, say, like college reporters at like Big Ten media days and stuff. It's a lot worse, actually, and people may not know that, but when people talk about ask the tough questions, well, these guys are on the complete opposite spectrum. So you got to navigate that, but it all works out.
It's like having 32 members of the Nebraska media out there, right?
No, I would say Nebraska's better than that.
Okay.
Clearly
better.
Wow.
It's pretty rough.
Well, a positive for the Nebraska media. Well, Doc, let's get into a couple of the players, and it's wide ranging. I see the 3-cone drill for Jay Higgins. That's great. And then you see the 40 time. Not so great. And there's a couple other ones. So let's just kind of go individual. Let's start with Jay Higgins. What you saw, did he improve his stock, and kind of where he sits now as we come into the aftermath of the combine?
Yeah, I don't think that there's really, I know the 40 time is kind of looked at negatively, but then you start to compare it against, people who are like him in the past. And, the first one, obviously, to me is Josie Jewell. Right. I mean, he ran the exact same time there, and he was a 4th round pick, and he's still in the league. He's still starting. People really like him. So I don't think that it's really anything that's too bothersome for him, and you think about linebackers like him, that he plays that way on film. You're not asking him to cover a slot receiver. You're not asking him to even cover a tight end, except in zone coverage. So I don't know that he did anything to hurt himself, even though he is a 4.82. That's not bad. It's Vontez Perfect. I remember him running a 5. Now that's bad. He was undrafted, but he is also character concern, which Jay has 0 of that.
Right.
So I think his movement skills that he showed in the 3-cone, I mean, that's what you want out of linebacker: quick burst, quick agility, and moves. And I thought he did really well there. And it's like anything. There's going to be some team that knocks him for one reason or another, and there's other team that says, you know what, we're overlooking that. We love the guy and his character, and we think he's a 3rd round pick.
Who else, Doc, from the Hawks that impressed you? Maybe caught your eye, caught some Scout's eyes that you're picking up on, our ears picking up on, that you've heard that really impressed?
Yeah, I think Connor Colby did really well. He ran a 5.1, but his size and his agility and stuff, I think he looked good. He looked the part. He went to Tampa and worked out, with a line kind of guru camp. And I think he's somebody that probably did more to elevate himself than maybe a lot of guys. And then, some of the others, you look at, some people really, really pour over the numbers. I don't quite do that. I think Sebastian Castro, while not being overly fast, was pretty good in agility. And then again, that may have cost him a little bit of money from somebody, but I think overall his play determines it. It's really kind of funny. I asked a couple of GMs on Monday last week, particularly about players that opt out with games left in the regular season or midway through the bowl game. And they were all like, we take them individually. We don't look at it collectively. And a couple of GMs were just like, you know what, I'm not going to fault anybody for making a business decision on their life. So those are the things that I was kind of more concerned about than actual, performance. Because, George Kittle blew it up when he was there, and he still ended up in the 5th round, and so I would expect somebody to come out smoking, and then fall flat on their face during training camp. And then somebody like, whether it's Castro or even Jay Higgins, to be maybe undervalued because of their 40 time and then go out and be really, really good for whatever team drafts. And
then we look up and they have an 8-10 year career and say, oh man, another Iowa guy that does that. Hey, wanted to ask you about Caleb Johnson, Doc. And 40 time was all right, but with his size, I think a lot of people anticipated that. A lot of people, though, talking about him in the Deuce Staley drill, what he was able to do and just showing that footwork. You look through, you got Caleb Johnson and Amario Hampton and Ashton Genty and Cam Scatabo and on and on.
Pretty good group.
It's not going to be what it was back in the 80s and 90s in terms of drafting running backs, but are we possibly on the precipice of a little bit of a resurgence at the running back position as we've seen NFL teams defensively morph into too high safety, don't get beat deep anymore? Could running backs be coming back in the NFL?
Yeah, for sure. It's a position that I think people are really identifying, because just as you said, when you got players you got teams that decide, all right, we're gonna go too deep, cover two safety deep, type of alignment with a fifth or even sixth defensive back on the field most of the time. Well, how do you take advantage of that?
Run the football.
And then you see Saquon Barkley, you see Derrick Henry, and teams are taking advantage of it. And, you got, Mel Kiper saying they should outlaw it. And I'm like, it's the yin and yang, man. As soon as the defenses adjust and go to an 8-man box, then you can throw over the top of them. Yep. It's just the way that it all works out. So I believe this is one of the best classes I've seen at running back. And I think Genty's the best. I mean, I'm not even going to pretend to say anybody's close to that. But I think after that, Hampton? It really depends on what you're looking for. Alvin Kamara ran a 4.56, and he's a guy that reminds me a lot of Hampton, in style. And then you got the two Ohio State backs who are different, but equally effective. And I would say the same deal with Caleb Johnson. He's more of a strider. It takes him a little bit of time to get to high gear, but he's also very physical. He also can attack the hole. And if you're going to judge him based on a 4.57 versus a 4.49, go for it. Troy Davis ran a 4.56. I mean, but that's just, it's ridiculous when people start to really split hairs that way. And he's an elite level running back. He's going to be really good for somebody if they get him in the right system. And I think you look at across the board, and Cam Scatabo, who wouldn't love that guy, and he's maybe like the sixth running back. So I think this is a banner year. I think you might have 6 or 7 starters out of this group. And another thing, I did ask a bunch of linebackers in the Big Ten who was the best one they went against. And all of them said number 2 from Iowa.
Really?
Except for the Minnesota guy. He goes, well, it's either Hampton or number 2 for Iowa. And then one person said, well, you played against Penn State. What did you think of those two? He goes, well, yeah, okay, they're second, third. I mean, so it's really pretty obvious the way he plays that he's as good or better than anybody else.
When it comes to Genty, I'm starting to see some Bears love out there, you Bears fans, 2 of whom I'm talking to at this particular moment, because Ben Johnson loved what Gibbs did for his offense in Detroit, and thinks Genty might be able to pull that one off. We'll see. How about Lachey, Doc? I know the tight ends, there's going to be probably, 4 or 5 tight ends by the end of the second day, seemingly, are going to hear their name called, or very early on Saturday. But Lachey, by all accounts, from what I've read, certainly didn't hurt his chances this weekend.
Sure. He did a really nice job. I thought, he didn't run the 40, which is fine. He wants to run it more at his pro day. Like Jay Higgins took the opposite route. He decided to run his 40 at both. He wants to run it at both spots because he figured the adrenaline will help him out. That's what he was told at the combine. And then he can kind of give that a baseline to then maybe improve upon it at his pro day. Well, Luke decided not to run it, but he had a really good vertical. His broad jump was good. All the numbers, even the 3-cone, it really showed off. I think he did a nice job there. We know that in his interviews, he'll do a great job. And, he's a upper level blocker. So he's in that 3rd, 4th round range. And it's kind of funny. I'm writing sort of about who's the real tight end over the last 25 and 10 years. And over 25, it's probably a little bit skews towards Miami. If it's over the last 10, it's Iowa. And then number 2 is blank. And, and seriously, Iowa's, if you combine these schools, like Iowa has their tight ends more than 16,000 yards over the last 10 years, the draft picks, whereas number 2 is Stanford with 8,700. 9 Pro Bowls to 2, and this doesn't count like one teams like Cincinnati with Travis Kelce, but just these teams that claim to be tight end it's Iowa. And he's going to add to that legacy. Now, Tyler Warren is helping Penn State, but they're clearly fifth on that list. Mitchell Evans at Notre Dame and Elijah Rojo from Miami. You know, they're all pretty good, and I think Lachey is probably going to go sixth or seventh, but you know, it's about one team really liking you, and there's going to be a lot of teams liking him.
Hopefully you were enjoying some shrimp cocktail on Friday night, not watching that dreg. Yeah. We've asked you a lot of times here recently, does it continue to feel like we're at the end of days for Fran McCaffery and whatever it plays out that we're going to see him maybe in Carver for the last time on Thursday?
That is something that I thought about this morning, actually. I did watch the game, by the way. It was at the end of the week, and I was kind of...
A little tired.
Well, yeah, I just ate and wrote and watched while I wrote. But, it is something that you have to contemplate. I mean, you know, there's been enough discussion about it, and Beth hasn't come out and said he's coming back for sure. You know, not that she has to because he's under contract, but, you know, when these types of discussions happen, you know, you really have to... But, you know, you pay attention to the silence as much as any kind of rhetoric that's said. And you know, it's interesting when you start to break it all down, because at a place like Iowa, his on-court accomplishments would normally merit an extra year, some sort of a discussion. I mean, even though he has, won anything like the Sweet 16, but it's, you know, you're entitled to a down year once in a while. But I'll say this: then you go back, it's really about the business of sport. When you can't fill your arena even to a third of it being full, then there's a cultural gap between you and your fans, a disconnect. And I think that's where we're at. And it's going to be up to Beth Getz to ultimately decide is this something that they can bridge, something they can bring together, or is it something that's just a bridge too far and you've got to, reinvent yourself? And I think in order to change the culture, you usually have to start at the top. I don't know if this can be amicable. I don't know if this is something that will be, a real difficult situation. I know it's not an easy decision regardless. So, but yeah, I think it's certainly possible that this is the end of the Fran McCaffrey era on Friday or on Thursday night, and they're going against a team that's, got the chance to actually win it outright, depending on what happens to Michigan on Wednesday. If not, clinch a share of the Big Ten regular season crown. So there's a lot in play Thursday night.
Indeed. Michigan State, nice win yesterday over Wisconsin. And here we go again. Izzo is got his team playing as well as they have all season in the month of March. Scott Dochterman, Doc, what can we look forward to at the Athletic this week with your name on it?
Yeah, I wrote today I talked to a bunch of the old Pac-12 players about the challenges of what they had to go through first season and the travel and what it did to them record-wise and everything. And I thought that was kind of interesting. I'm writing today about a bunch of takeaways from the Combine. I'm going to Ames tomorrow for a story that'll appear right around the start of the NCAA tournament. So I'll be there all day, and including BYU Iowa State game. And then later on, I will do Iowa Michigan State, see what happens there. So it's going to be a pretty packed week with a lot of football and basketball.
Good stuff, Scott Dochterman. Thank you, Doc.
Back with you one final time on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for being with us and making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We got a lot of basketball, plenty of football talk today. We got even more we need to get into on the football front, but it's a busy time. Big Ten wrestling tournament begins coming up in just a couple of days. We are going to get into that. We're going to be talking with Zach Seiko from Locked On Nittany Lions. We'll give you a preview of the wrestling. We, of course, got the matchup against Michigan State in men's basketball, as we just talked about, with Scott Dochterman, potentially the final game at Carver Hawkeye Arena in the Fran McCaffrey era, though Fran says he ain't going anywhere. We'll talk about that a little bit tomorrow. So a lot going on here. We got you covered. And of course, Wednesday evening, it will be Iowa, Wisconsin opening up in the Big Ten women's basketball tournament. Now, as we've talked about, I was going to be a big favorite in this game, much like they were in the regular season finale against Wisconsin. They're going to be favored, but I wanted to throw this number out to you. And I think it was certainly an eye opener to me going back over now the last month plus. Iowa, we've talked about in their last 10 games, has gone 8-2. And an analytical website, Bart Torvik, where you can sort things by date. Since Iowa opened up and got back on the right track, since they got that win against Washington out on the road. We're talking about a 6-week sample size here. Pretty big sample size. The Iowa Hawkeyes are a top 10 team in the country. Not only are they ranked in the top 10 with the analytical numbers, they are number 8 in the country in offensive efficiency and number 19 in defensive efficiency. This team is playing at a high level. Now, the turnover rate, still not great, but improved. They're shooting the ball incredibly well from the outside. They're guarding the line. This team can beat you in a myriad of different ways. That's what's different than what they've been here over the last couple. They had to beat you with offense. There weren't many times recently that Iowa could just go out there, clamp down, and beat you on the defensive end of the floor. This team has proven that they can do that. We've talked about the path, what potentially could be in front of them. If Iowa gets a win against Wisconsin, then beats Michigan State, this thing could get hairy in a way, and this one absolutely could go where Iowa's making another deep run in the Big Ten tournament. We'll be back with you after the Wednesday night game. Again, a lot going on. We preview Michigan State with our buddy Matt Sheehan over with Locked On Spartans. We got a Big Ten wrestling preview coming your way. All the basketball as well. We got football storylines. I was still in search of a running back coach. The hiring of Warren Ruggiero, I think, is an absolute slam dunk. It's always a good time to be a Hawkeye. Plus, we got spring sports going on, track and field, the baseball team, and the softball team. And there is another story that is happening. What's happening with the softball team? Already had the head coach, Coach Gillespie, that medically stepped away from the team back in December. Now an assistant coach possibly out. Boy, a lot of craziness happening with the softball team, and we will get you covered on that front as well. Never know what's going to be happening, whatever comes up, but we are with you each and every day here, Locked On Hawkeyes. Thanks for being with us and making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Back to you again tomorrow. Until then, go Hawks.